football fans, and welcome back to Road to the Big Game, the series where I chronicle both teams' journey to the Super Bowl and, of course, talk about the game itself. This time, we're talking about Super Bowl III. The date, January 12th, 1969. The Orange Bowl in Miami, Florida, over 75,000 fans in attendance to witness the Baltimore Colts of the NFL with their powerful passing game and a defense full of depth, and their opponents, the AFL's New York Jets, a fearless and very unique quarterback leading the way, and a tremendous defensive core up front, but they were given absolutely zero chance of winning this game. The Colts were favored by 18 points. The AFL was, well, considered Bush League by many football media experts and pundits, as well as fans. The Super Bowl itself, even though it wasn't really called that at the time, was also laughed off by many. The first one did quite well in TV ratings, but viewership was down dramatically the next season. Both games were dominated by the NFL's Green Bay Packers. So now, let's go back and take a look at how these teams came to this point. The Baltimore Colts entered the NFL in 1953, but there was a team called the Colts who had a short shelf life from 1947 to 50. However, clothing businessman Carroll Rosenblum brought the Colts back to the NFL 3 years later. The Colts were a hit with fans in Baltimore. It is a football town. After finishing their first two seasons with identical 3-9-0 records, they improved slightly to 5-6-1 in 1955. But in 1956, well, the Colts made a pretty big addition. Coach Weeb Ewbank saw a lot of potential in Johnny Unitas. He was actually part of the Pittsburgh Steelers roster, but wasn't at all being used. But Unitas still wasn't a starter. The Colts had finished 5-7-0. However, Johnny U, as he was affectionately called, was given a chance to shine in 1957 and did very well, made his first Pro Bowl appearance. He was a second-team All-Pro, led the league in passing yardage and touchdowns. The Colts, however, did miss the playoffs despite an improvement to 7-5-0. Johnny U, yes indeed, was the man with the golden arm. His quick release, his overall strategy were unheard of and very unique. He was a game changer. He was the All-American boy from Pittsburgh, the crew cut, the all-business mentality. He was truly a football player that people loved to love. Also, a key defensive element was added to this team as Don Shinnick, linebacker, was added to the club. General Manager Red Kellett made a great move in the 1958 draft, however, taking 11th overall Lenny Lyles from Louisville. He broke the school's color barrier in 1954 and became a star for the team. As a return specialist, he had speed, size, and a great ability to dodge tacklers. As a cornerback, he could keep up with the fastest receivers and was great at breaking up completion attempts. His 300 points with the club still stands as a school record by most from a non-kicker. And something big happened in 1958 to this team. The Baltimore Colts won the NFL championship. They defeated the New York Giants in what many believe to this day is the greatest game ever played. Unitas was a beast all season. Another Pro Bowl, first-team All-Pro, leader in touchdowns, passer rating, and was remarkable in a big game and a thrilling overtime win. The next year, Johnny U led the Colts to another championship, this time over the same Giants, but a little more dominant, 31-16. That year, in 1959, he was NFL MVP for the very first time. He made another Pro Bowl, was a first-team All-Pro, led the league in passing yards and touchdowns. These Colts were truly something. It wasn't just Johnny. They had players in the backfield such as Alan Amici, the Iron Horse, star fullback Lenny Moore, star split end Raymond Berry. Great offensive line that allowed Unitas to thrive, led by Jim Parker, as well as Art Spinney, Buzz Nutter, Alex Sandusky, and George Prius. But that defensive line, my goodness, superstar end Gino Marchetti, amazing tackle Art Donovan. I wonder how much that guy weighs. Well, they also had Pro Bowler Gene Lipscomb and Don Joyce. The linebacking core was led by Dick Zemanski, along with Don Shinnick and Bill Pellington. Defensive backs were led by star Andy Nelson, as well as Milt Davis and Carl Tassif. So as the Colts enter the 1960s, can they keep this success up? Well, at the 1960 draft, they made a steal in the 10th round, taking Bobby Boyd from Oklahoma, and he was a jack of all trades. He played quarterback, defensive back, he was a punt returner. He led the Sooners to an Orange Bowl victory in 1958, and then was a first-team Big 8 All-Star in 1959. But for the Colts, he will indeed star at defensive back. But alas, 1960 was not the best year for the Colts. Now, to add context, to make the NFL championship in this 13-team league, you had to win your conference during the regular season. And to be a part of the Playoff Bowl, which is the game for the runner-ups, you had to finish second. But their first-round pick in the 1960 draft was a fellow by the name of Ron Mix, an offensive tackle out of USC, but he opted to play in the AFL. The Colts finished 6-6-0, finishing 4th in the West. Unitas again had a great year, leading in yards and touchdowns, a Pro Bowler, second team All-Pro. Raymond Berry, what a year he had, nearly 1,300 receiving yards and led the league. But the Colts, well, at the end of the year, they would lose some key elements. 4-time Pro Bowler Alan Amici retired, as did offensive lineman Art Spinney, a 3-time All-Pro. They'd also lose defensive lineman Don Joyce to the Vikings, and talented defensive back Milt Davis retired. However, Colts general manager Kellett made a huge deal. He traded 2-time Pro Bowl and All-Pro defensive end Gene Lipscomb, an offensive lineman Buzz Nutter, to the Pittsburgh Steelers for receiver Jimmy Orr. Orr was known for catching passes in the back of corners of the end zones and managing to stay in bounds on sideline throws. He was an instant star for the Steelers, winning the NFL's Rookie of the Year in 1958, catching for over 900 yards, second team All-Pro to boot. He again was a second team All-Pro the following year and was selected to his first Pro Bowl. He had quick foot speed and, despite past injury issues, overcame all of them. But however, after the 1960 season, where he was still impressive with 540 yards receiving on 29 catches, he wasn't seen as part of the Steelers' long-term future. Despite accumulating over 2,000 yards receiving in 3 seasons, which back then was huge. But he will be a big part of the Colts going forward, as now Unitas has another big target to throw to along with Berry. They also made another acquisition from the Steelers, underrated defensive tackle Billy Ray Smith. In the 1961 draft, Kellett made some excellent selections. Beginning in the first round at 7th overall pick was Tom Matty, a running back and quarterback from Ohio State. He threw for close to 1,200 yards in his time there, rushed for 868, 682 coming in his final year, where he was first team All-Big Ten and third team All-American. Again, he had the size, he had the speed, he had a great arm, but indeed his time with the Colts will be in the backfield. They would take another backfielder in Jerry Hill that year, and they also acquired former NFL MVP I should say, and 3-time Pro Bowl running back Joe Perry from the San Francisco 49ers. The 1961 season saw the Colts finish 8-6-0 as the NFL moved to a 14-game season. United still had a good year, but didn't lead in any categories as they again missed the championship. Berry still had a really good year himself with 873 yards receiving, while Moore rushed for close to 650, while Perry rushed for 675. Their offensive rank, however, fell to, 7th due to not accumulating enough points. The defense was down from 10 to 14. They also had a star pass attack up front still, but decent secondary, but defensive back Carl Tassif was dealt to the Eagles during this season. At the end of the year, 5-time Pro Bowler and first-team All-Pro, future Hall of Famer Art Donovan retired. So did Pro Bowl tight end Jim Mutscheller. At the 1962 draft in the 3rd round, the Colts took 6'3", 250-pound offensive lineman Dan Sullivan out of Boston College. In the 7th round, they took Fred Miller, a steal of a pick, defensive tackle out of LSU. He still would play the 1962 season in college and would become a first-team All-American after that, and first-team All-SEC, showing the Colts, they had him very well scouted before his big year in college. But the Colts would finish a mere 7-7-0 in 1962. Their first-round pick, Wendell Harris, an all-star defensive back from LSU, did not pan out. Despite another good year from Unitas, the Colts' offense was slipping again, and their offensive line wasn't giving much of Unitas to work with. Despite this, Jimmy Orr, proving to be a big part of this team now, had 974 receiving yards, while defensive back Bobby Boyd had 7 picks, as the Colts' defense moved up to 6th best in the league. Defensive lineman Gino Marchetti had another great season, but the big shock at the end of the season came when the Weeb Eubank era came to an end. He was fired not long after the season ended, after being the team's coach since 1954, their second year in the league. Owner Rosenblum felt Weeb's laid-back style just didn't fit the team anymore, but we will hear more from him later. For their new coach, however, going into the 1963 season, they hired 33-year-old Don Shula, who played as an NFL defensive back for 7 seasons, 4 of which were with the Colts. After a year's defensive back coach, respectively in Virginia and Kentucky on the college circuit, he took a job as defensive back coach for the Detroit Lions in 1960, and took over as defensive coordinator for the 61 and 62 seasons. During all 3 seasons there, the Lions were ranked top 3 among team defenses, and won the NFL Playoff Bowl 3 years in a row. That was the annual, of course, game for the runners-up, as I mentioned. He was considered to be very young for a head coach, but unlike Weeb, he was tougher, practical, and had an emphasis more on discipline. He wanted to build a tougher team along with Kellen Rosenblum's vision. Well, at the 1963 draft, the Colts continued to build a stronger force. So 5th overall in the player selection meeting, they took Ohio State offensive tackle 6'5" towering Bob Vogel. Well, Vogel didn't have the weight on him that a lot of offensive tackles had. He did have a style that allowed him to be quick to catch any pass rusher, and still block anyone. In 1961, he helped Ohio State to the NCAA Division I title. He's a two-time second-team All-Big Ten in both 61 and 62, and was a second-team All-American in 1962. He's just what Unitas needs in front of him. This was a great pick, but the Colts made an even better call in the second round, as they took Syracuse tight end John Mackey. At running back and tight end, he had, again, that combination everybody looked for in this era of size and speed. He could also block. He could hit. In 3 years for the Orangemen, he had 481 yards receiving, 259 yards rushing, and helped them win the 1961 Liberty Bowl. Was a second-team All-Eastern selection, and in 1962 was a first-team selection. This gives the Colts offense a lot more depth going forward. Oh, but wait. There's more. Shula was then provided with a defensive back he can help mold, and that was Jerry Logan, taken in the 4th round from West Texas State, 47th overall. While his role with the Colts will definitely be on defense, he was a multi-dimensional star in 4 seasons. He had 925 yards rushing, 430 yards receiving, and played safety on defense as well, and was very good at reading pass and receiving patterns. He helped lead his team to win the 1962 Sun Bowl. And even in the 7th round, the Colts were making out like bandits in this draft. Willie Richardson was taken 89th overall from Jackson State in Mississippi. Indeed, in the segregated state, Willie became a superstar, known for his receiving skills with quick hands in the flanker position. He, like Mackey, selected before him, had an uncanny combination of size and speed. In both 1961 and 62, he led the Tigers to Southwestern Athletic Conference titles. He was a first-team All-American in 1962, where he had an amazing year of 896 yards receiving, with 20.8 yards a catch on average. The Colts improved to 8-6-0 of the year, but still no playoffs. Their defense fell a spot to 7th. Still pretty good. Their offense jumped up to 7th. As Unitas had a great year, as he led the league in passing yards and was a second-team All-Pro. And receivers Orr, Berry, and rookie John Mackey each had over 700 yards respectively. But their running game was weak as Joe Perry went back to San Francisco, and Lenny Moore missed half the season. On defense, however, Gino Marchetti was still proving to be among the best in the league among defensive linemen, with his 10th straight Pro Bowl selection. Either way, there's a lot for Shula to work with in the future going forward. Again, there's just some tweaks he might need to make. But also Andy Nelson, the team star safety, would be traded to the Giants in the offseason. The Colts were trying to build into a tougher squad, but now they also needed a new kicker. And they happened to grab someone who was a star defensive end, and they sacrificed their first-round draft pick, Marv Woodson, to get him. Indeed, they acquired a 2-time Pro Bowler from the last 2 seasons with the Steelers, Lou Michaels, a strong foot that has allowed him to accumulate 326 points. But on the D-line, he was quick to get any great QB off his feet and off the snap, and added great pressure to give his teams momentum, and a part of the Steelers' fearsome foursome. The 1964 season, what a year! The Colts had a 12-2-0 record, NFL Western Championships. Best offense and defense in the league. Johnny Unitas wins his 2nd MVP award and is a first-team All-Pro for the first time since 1959. Star running back Lenny Moore roared back with a vengeance. 584 yards rushing, 472 yards receiving, and named NFL's Comeback Player of the Year. Jimmy Orr had 867 yards receiving as well. Bobby Boyd, again, producing immensely in the secondary with 9 interceptions. This team would have 8 Pro Bowl selections. Don Shula whipped this team into shape at last and was named Coach of the Year. Sadly, however, they were dominated in the NFL Championship by the Cleveland Browns, led, of course, by the incredible Jim Brown. They'd lose 27-0. Unitas was intercepted twice. Moore was held to just 40 yards on the ground, and the Colts were actually favored to win this game by 7. A heartbreaking end to an outstanding season, and despite garnering his first All-Pro selection, linebacker Bill Pellington retired. So that, of course, likely means, well, they'll be looking at linebackers in the next draft. And 14th overall in the 1965 draft in the first round, they indeed took linebacker Mike Curtis out of Duke. He also doubled as a fullback with driving force type power. He ran for just over 1,000 yards in 3 seasons at Duke and had 15 touchdowns. He was also a 2-time Atlantic Coast Conference All-Star in 62 and 64, second-team All-Star in 63, was a third-team All-American in 64. He'll be used as in the linebacking core for the Colts. The Colts will also acquire linebacker Dennis Gobbets from Detroit. And in the 3rd round, they added more depth to their offensive line by drafting Penn State's Glenn Ressler, two-time first-team All-East, and in 1964, consensus All-American. He was named College Lineman of the Year, so surprising to a lot that he wasn't taken sooner. And the 1965 season saw the Colts tie the Packers for first in the West with a 10-3-1 record. But then there was going to be a controversial playoff game to see who wins the division. The Packers tied the game with a field goal, which was clearly wide. Official Jim Tunney stated that it was over the goalpost before the wind carried it, which is complete bull, seemingly making up rules as he goes along. This is actually, however, changed the way goalposts are made in football. Colts lost in overtime. They did, however, win the NFL Playoff Bowl, being the runner-up in the East, the Dallas Cowboys, and this very angry Colts team dominated them 35-3. Their offense and defense was still ranked in the top 5. Unitas was, well, again, a first-team All-Pro and led the league with the highest passer rating for precise since 1958. Jimmy Orr had another great season. Bobby Boyd's 9 interceptions led the league. Gino Marchetti took a year absence. At the end of the season, offensive lineman George Prius retired. He was a big part of their championship teams back in the late 50s. In the offseason, the Colts, however, did need a new punter, and they got David Lee out of Louisiana Tech, who went undrafted by the NFL, but the Colts picked him up as a free agent. A booming foot that could bury the opposition deep and greeted angling kicks exactly where he needed them to go. In the 1966 draft, the Colts took offensive tackle Sam Ball in the first round, 15th overall, a consensus All-American out of Kentucky. The 1966 season would see the NFL expand to 15 teams as the Atlanta Falcons joined the league. And this was the year where, well, the first Super Bowl would be introduced, but being referred to as the AFL versus NFL championship game, or other way around, however you want to put it. But either way, the Colts, however, would come up short of making it, finishing 9-5-0 and having to settle for another playoff bowl win, this time over the Eagles. Their offense slipped all the way down to 8 due to a weak running game this season. However, tight end John Mackey had a career year, 829 yards receiving, and Bobby Boyd proving to be one of the best defensive backs in the league at 6 interceptions. However, at the end of the year, Red Kellett retired as general manager. He had been with their team since their inception in 1953. Harry Holmes, who had been with the organization pretty much for a whole decade, will take over. He assisted Kellett as GM for several years. Also, offensive lineman Alex Sandusky, who spent 13 seasons with the team, had retired. Gino Marchetti returned to the team and only played 4 games before retiring for good. He would have his jersey retired by the Colts and was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in his first year of eligibility, and to this day is regarded as one of the best defensive players of all time. So now the Colts need to add depth to their defensive line, they feel, which is why in the 1967 draft, when they actually had the first overall pick due to a deal with the expansion Saints, they took Bubba Smith out of Michigan State, a towering 6'7", nasty, vicious, unrelenting, yet dynamically talented as a defensive tackle. He was adored by fans with a chance of kill, Bubba, kill. And any quarterback or ball carrier that was in his path would pay the heaviest price possible. 2-time first-team All-Big Ten, consensus All-American in 65, unanimous All-American in 1966, UPI Lineman of the Year that same year. He was a unique talent that will no doubt impact the Colts positively. Then in the second round, the Colts stayed in Michigan, however, this time going to the Wolverines. They picked free safety Rick Volk. He was also a fullback as well as a safety, but the latter played more to his strengths. Again, he had uncanny pass coverage. A second-team All-Big Ten selection in 64, and first team the following 2 seasons, Volk also helped the Wolverines win the 1965 Rose Bowl. He finished his senior year in 1966 as a first-team All-American. Also around this time, the Colts acquired offensive lineman Bill Curry, who was a part of the Packers in their first Super Bowl win and got himself a little ring to go with it. As both a center and a linebacker, he looks to fill the shoes of Dick Zemansky, whose career is winding down. Well, indeed, in 1967, the Colts finished with an incredible 11-1-2 record and missed the playoffs. What the f***? Well, the NFL was now 16 teams strong. They created 4 divisions, the Colts being the Coastal Division, and they were undefeated going into the final game against division rivals, the Los Angeles Rams, who were 10-1-2. The Rams stunned the Colts, 34-10. Only first-place teams in these divisions made the playoffs. And despite the identical records, the tiebreaker rule of being outscored in head-to-head games gave the Rams the playoff spot. Wow, this Colts team still holds the North American sports record of highest win percentage without a playoff berth. Despite this, however, Johnny Unitas is named MVP for a 3rd time. Willie Richardson was his primary go-to target with 860 yards receiving. Bobby Boyd, another incredible year, 6 interceptions. Their offense and defense were second best in the league. This is the makings of a championship caliber team. At the end of the year, Colts icons receiver Raymond Berry and running back Lenny Moore both retired, having lost their starting jobs pretty much at this point and battling injuries. Both, however, are in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But it's time to forget the heartbreak of 1967 and prepare for 1968. But we'll get to that in a bit. The American Football League, the AFL, was launched in 1960. It was intended to be direct competition to the NFL. The league was founded by businessmen Lamar Hunt and Bud Adams, and 8 teams would debut in the inception for this league. Lamar Hunt would run the Dallas Texans. Adams would run the Houston Oilers. Also, you had the Los Angeles Chargers, Oakland Raiders, and Denver Broncos, who along with the Texans made up the West Division. And joining the Oilers in the East, the Boston Patriots, the Buffalo Bills, and the New York Titans. That's where our story begins. The New York Titans looked like a very middle-of-the-road team, even on paper, going into their first season. They were, however, coached by Sammy Baugh, one of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of football, regarded as such to this very day. The general manager was Steve Sabo, who had vast experience managing on the collegiate level. They had a former NFL Pro Bowl quarterback, however, he was a journeyman in Al Doro. They had a decent backfield led by rookie Bill Mathis, and he was one of their first picks. They would obtain a strong receiver in Art Powell, but there was a man who would become a legend for this club as well. His name was Don Maynard. He went to college at Texas Western and did very well there. He was taken in the 9th round of the 1957 NFL draft by the New York Giants. He made the team in 1958, but was cut after the season. He played a single game for the Hamilton Tiger Cats of the Canadian Football League, but the Titans actually still saw something in him, and he was signed as a free agent. He had efficient hands, speed, but wasn't given much of a chance to show what he can do. The Titans' offensive line, however, was nothing to write home about. As a matter of fact, neither was their defensive line. But they made a great pick at the first AFL draft, taking linebacker Larry Grantham out of Ole Miss, a fast-tackling linebacker who could also play the end on offense, and tremendous at special teams, and also not a bad pass coverer. He was a second-team All-SEC star in 1958 and first-team All-Star in 59. He capped off his career brilliantly with a win in the 1960 Sugar Bowl, 21-0 over LSU, where he caught a touchdown pass, blocked a punt, and had 9 tackles. What a performance. And to top this, he was also drafted by the Colts, but he opted to play in the AFL, seeing that he had a better career opportunity there. But to top things off, the defensive back core how run this team was meh, as with their special teams. But how are the Titans doing their inaugural season? Well, they actually exceeded expectations. They finished 7-7-0, but like the NFL, only the division winners make the championship, and there's no playoff bowl for the runners-up, as indeed the Jets finished second in the East, despite playing at the horribly outdated Manhattan Polo Grounds Stadium. But they actually had the best-ranked offense in the league. Joe proved to be an excellent quarterback, leading the league with 26 touchdown passes, and the receiving combo of Powell and Maynard were both amazing. Both had over 1,000 yards. Powell had 1,167 for 4th best in the league, while Maynard was 2nd best with 1,265. Their running game was actually quite diverse, thanks to Duro's ability to scramble and run, as well as rookies Dewey Bowling and Bill Mathis in the backfield. But their biggest problem was a poor defense. So poor, as a matter of fact, they were the worst in the league. Grantham did have a really good rookie year, and the Jets did try as they could with the young defense they had, but again, just weren't able to topple better teams. The Jets did make a very good acquisition, however, for their special teams. Curly Johnson, a punter, who spent his rookie year with the Texans, appearing in just 3 games. But things didn't look much better going into the 1961 season. The Titans did make a great first-round pick, with 2nd overall, with offensive lineman Tom Brown out of Minnesota. He was also drafted by the Colts back in 1959. However, he'd play for neither. He opted to play for the BC Lions, the Canadian Football League, where he collected a Grey Cup ring and became a Hall of Famer. Again, the Titans finished 7-7-0, this time only good enough for 3rd in the East. Their defense saw a slight improvement. Their offense did slip down. Duro threw an awful 30 interceptions. His time in New York was done. Maynard's production slipped, but Powell's 851 yards was 5th best, and Mathison's 846 rushing yards was 2nd best in the league. During the season, however, Dewey Bowling struggled and was traded to Buffalo. Steve Sebo was also done as general manager. This team was already seeming like a sinking ship, not to mention they were in an ancient ruin of a stadium, and were generating the worst revenue in the league, resulting in poor media coverage, and team owner Harry Weismer was in way over his head. It didn't look like this team would even last, as the AFL, to be fair, was actually exceeding expectations, while still not a monster success. Under new general manager George Sauer Sr., things didn't get any better in 1962. First-round pick Sandy Stevens, a superstar quarterback out of Minnesota, a national champion and consensus All-American, never played a single game for the team. Their offense was second worst in the league, which included the worst running game. It was not a great year for Bill Mathis. Dick Christie, however, was okay. Their QB situation was a complete mess, despite another incredible year for Art Powell, who led the league with 1,130 yards receiving, and Maynard had a rebound year with 1,041, second best in the league. But they lack a real leader at quarterback, and injury and inconsistencies didn't help. Their defense was the absolute worst in the league, despite Lee Riley leading the AFL in interceptions with 11, but he retired at the end of the year. The Titans finished 5-9-0, dead last in the East. Coach Sonny Baugh was finished. George Sauer Sr. didn't last as general manager either. However, he would stay with the team as an executive. But worst of all, they lost Art Powell to the Raiders, where he continued to shine. And owner Harry Weismer lost the team. Many were expecting the Titans to fold, but it didn't quite go down that way. In 1963, the New York Titans were purchased by a consortium group of partners. The two best-known figures in the deal were Sonny Reblin, an entertainment mogul, and Leon Hess, an oil and gas tycoon. They were making big changes instantly. First, the team name and the colors. The Titans had, to be fair, a pretty bland look, so they brought on a new catchy and marketable name for this club, and a pretty good logo, too. The New York Jets. They would go to the more enticing green and white look, and it got positive feedback pretty instantly. Sadly, however, they were still stuck at the Polo Grounds, but even that wouldn't be for long. Also, the new ownership group wanted someone to run the ship expertly and coach them to a more prominent path, and they found the man they were looking for. And it was Weeb Ewbank. Yes, the very same Weeb Ewbank I talked about earlier in this video, who turned the Baltimore Colts into winners. The same man who guided them to back-to-back NFL championships in 1958 and 59. He will serve as both coach and general manager for this new-look Jets team, bringing his record of 59, 52, and 1 with him. He's also coach of the year in 1958. This made big news at the time, and many felt this could be the man to take this New York club out of the gutter. And Ewbank was ready to take this team to a better place and was determined to do so. And now the Jets have someone who can, well, have a better eye for talent. And speaking of eye for talent, all the way in the 27th round, the Jets made a steal of a pick. Dave Herman out of Michigan State at guard. He won't join the team, however, until 1964. But then Ewbank took a chance on an undrafted offensive lineman, Texas Southern's offensive tackle, Winston Hill, 6'4", 270 pounds, a very imposing presence, could add a lot of substance to this club. And Hill was actually picked in the NFL draft by the Colts. Also to add depth to their defensive secondary, undrafted Bill Baird of San Francisco was also signed. Despite the nice new look, the team was still not that good. They finished 5-8-1, still dead last in the East, and their offense was also dead last. Their first-round pick was Jerry Stovall, third overall, but he opted to play for a team that took him second overall in the NFL draft, the St. Louis Cardinals, where he had a really good career. Blake Turner, however, who was briefly with the Colts, actually had a breakout year with 1,009 yards receiving, fifth best in the league. Maynard remained impressive with 780. Bill Baird had 6 interceptions for an excellent rookie year, and QB Dick Wood, had a solid, albeit inconsistent year. Either way, this team is far from complete, but at least they'll be moving into beautiful Shea Stadium next season, where baseball's brand new New York Mets play. And with the third overall pick in the draft, the Jets make a great move here. They take running back Matt Snell out of Ohio State. Pure power, can drive through any tackler with quick thinking and quick feet. He helped Ohio State to a national championship in 1961, but his abilities at defensive end is what made him a second-team All-Big Ten star in 1962. He returned a fullback in 63 and rushed for 491 yards and 5 touchdowns. A dynamic player which Jets definitely need, but they didn't stop there. In the third round, they took Jerry Philbin, a defensive end out of Buffalo. He had size and was a fast pass rusher and was able to apply pressure to any given opposing QB or offense. He was a first-team All-Star in his senior year in 1963, but was overlooked by many scouts and general managers. The Jets would also make a steal in the 6th round with Ralph Baker, a linebacker out of Penn State. They also signed their kicker, free agent Jim Turner out of Utah State, who was drafted by the Redskins but failed his tryout. Also added was former All-Star and AFL champion with the Kansas City Chiefs, who are formerly the Dallas Texans, Paul Rochester. But the 1964 season didn't see much movement in the standings, as again they are 5-8-1. This time, however, it was good enough for third place. Their offense was still pretty bad, second worst in the league, but Matt Snell proved to be his worth weight in gold in the first round because his rushing for 948 yards was second best in the league. AFL's Rookie of the Year. Receiver Blake Turner had another great year with 974 yards, which was fifth best. Maynard's 847 was 10th best. But the problem was quarterback Dick Wood. Anyway, he's not getting the ball in the end zone. He just not the quarterback to lead this team. His time in New York was up. The defense, however, showed some improvement. Linebacker Larry Grantham continues to shine with 8.5 sacks and was first-team AFL All-Star for the 5th straight season. While defensive back Deanard Paulson shocked everyone, breaking out with 12 interceptions, while Bill Baird also played very well. The Jets moved to Shea Stadium, their attendance improved, and the AFL itself was actually doing pretty well, and their media coverage was increasing. And going into the 1965 draft, the Jets would have the first overall pick. And you know they have to be thinking, finally, a franchise quarterback who can lead this team. And indeed, Eubank knows who he wants. Out of Alabama Crimson Tide, superstar Joe Namath. A dangerous long passer who grits it out through injury and is able to come up in the clutch and is cool under pressure. With Alabama, he accumulated over 2,100 yards passing through 25 touchdown passes and had close to a 55% completion percentage, and was two-time second-team All-SEC star in 62 and 63, and being recognized as a first-team All-Star in his senior year of 64. He also led the Crimson Tide to a national championship in 64, and despite hamstring cartilage issues in his knee, led them to an Orange Bowl appearance in early 1965. His knee, however, is why some NFL scouts seem very skeptical of him. He actually went 12th overall in the NFL draft, regardless, to the St. Louis Cardinals. But team ownership signed Namath to a monster $427,000 deal over 3 years, the biggest contract in pro football at the time. Some thought the Jets were nuts for this. I mentioned how Colts star, also Johnny Unitas, was the clean-cut All-American boy, all business. But Namath looked like a rock star and presented himself as such. He was very confident. Some would say he was brash and arrogant, but he was a truly red carpet athlete you could see as a real celebrity. He was also the man Eubank wanted to build his team around, and ownership wanted him as their poster boy. Indeed, Broadway Joe had arrived. The Jets, however, still weren't finished in this draft, as they took in the third round defensive end out of Jackson State, Verlin Biggs, a very physical and powerful player. He was very popular in Jackson, and his play evolved year after year, and by his senior year, he was a second-team All-American. Also that same round, linebacker Al Atkinson was taken, but originally by the Buffalo Bills, but the Jets would be the one to acquire him. A star at Villanova, he had the height and the weight to be an efficient tackler, but he could also cover passes and have pretty quick hands like a defensive back. In his senior year, he was first-team All-East and a first-team All-American. Later on in the redshirt portion of the draft, George Sauer Jr., the son of former Jets GM and current executive George Sauer Sr., was taken as well from the Texas Longhorns. He was part of their legendary run to the 1963 National Championship and actually helped Texas beat Joe Namath's Alabama in the Orange Bowl in 1965. But Eubank was still not finished by adding more depth on the offensive line. All-American out of Hofstra on Long Island, 6'4", 250-pound center John Schmidt. And lastly, another undrafted free agent, Sauer Jr.'s Texas teammate, the man who helped them to many of those bowl game wins, Jim Hudson, who will join the Jets as a safety, but was a tremendous quarterback at Texas. A thinking man's player, he was good at reading the opposition on either side of the ball. He was part of the Longhorns again, big national championship win, and it was his legendary 69 touchdown pass to Sauer in the 1965 Orange Bowl that led the Longhorns to that big win. But again, the 1965 Jets would finish 5-8-1. But ownership still believed in Eubank, as this was a very young team that now he had a lot more to work with and mold. But Namath delivered. He was the AFL's top rookie. Don Maynard benefited from Namath's play with 1,218 yards receiving, which was second best in the league. Matt Snell had no sophomore jinx. His 763 yards on the ground were tremendous, and fourth best in the league. Verlin Biggs' rookie year was tremendous, tied for fourth with 8 sacks. And Deanard Paulson was tied for second with 7 interceptions. All Eubank needs is to make sure that the stars keep delivering and the young players evolve. Namath's hype did bring in more ticket sales for Shea Stadium. Eubank, more than ever, now has something to build on for a winner. In the 6th round of the 1966 draft, he took running back Emerson Boozer out of Maryland State, a speedy back some feel was overlooked due to his, somewhat lack of size. Backfielders were typically bigger back then, but he was a two-time first-team All-American in both his junior and senior year and ran for a total of 2,537 yards in 4 seasons, as well as 22 touchdowns. In the 8th round, the Jets also took tight end Pete Lemons out of Texas. To add more strength to their defensive backcourt, they added 3-time second-team All-Pro defensive back Johnny Sample, who has been an All-Pro with all 3 teams he has played with. The Colts, where he was, again, part of those 2 championship teams, the Steelers and the Redskins most recently. He was coming off a year with 6 picks, and that indeed was his 3rd year as second-team All-Pro, and also has size on him and was a tremendous hitter and tackler. At this point in his career, he had 24 interceptions. And hey, the Jets finished with a pretty decent record of 6-6-2 in 1966, but still only good enough for 3rd in the East, but the improvement was showing. Also, the AFL is now 9 teams strong with the arrival of the Miami Dolphins. The Jets' first-round pick, however, Bill Yarby, sadly does not pan out due to knee injuries. Namath is outstanding, leading the league in passing yardage and completions. And what a huge year for George Sauer Jr. 1,079 yards receiving, 4th in the league. Maynard's 840 was 6th best. Verlin Biggs led the AFL in sacks with 12.5. This Jets team is growing on both sides of the ball. Star defensive back Daynard Paulson, however, retired at the end of the season. Eubank and his scouts, however, were still looking deep and still looking in Texas for the Longhorns, which is why in the 7th round of the draft, they took defensive lineman John Elliott of the Longhorns, who was part of that Orange Bowl winning team I mentioned in early '65, but broke his leg in the game and has had numerous injury issues, which is why he kept getting passed over. But the Jets are taking a chance on him. They also took undrafted defensive back Randy Beverly out of Colorado State, passed up in both the NFL and AFL drafts due to seemingly a lack of size. Also, they signed offensive lineman Randy Rasmussen out of Nebraska Kearney. And now for the 1967 season. And wow, the Jets have their best season ever to date. 8-5-1. The AFL is now 10 teams strong with the arrival of the Cincinnati Bengals. The Jets' following is growing, and Eubank at last has built a formidable team. But like the Colts' 1967 season, this season ended in heartbreak. The team was 7-2-1 after November 19th. The closest team to them was the Houston Oilers at 5-3-1, but the Jets would go on to lose 3 in a row. Houston would win 4 of the next 5 to take the playoff spot and a slot in the championship. Either way, Joe Namath made history, becoming the first QB in pro football history to reach 4,000 yards in passing. Don Maynard benefited greatly from this, having a career year of 1,434 yards, leading the league in receiving, while George Sauer Jr. had 1,189 yards for 2nd best in the league. The Jets' running game, however, still needs some tweaks and some better blocking as well. The Jets' defense still needs a little bit of growth, but their defensive line was excelling. Verlin Biggs was 2nd in the league in sacks with 15, but Jerry Philbin was 4th best with 12. Veteran linebacker Larry Grantham had a great year, as did Al Hawkinson. Each had 5 interceptions. So now we know the Jets are capable of winning, but there are still many experts out there that believe they're just not deep enough to actually be winners. But now, as both the Colts and the Jets are coming off of heartbreaking seasons, we're now ready for 1968 and see just what they'll do to get to the big game. First is the 1968 NFL-AFL draft. It's now a joint venture between the 2 leagues. The Jets had the 17th overall pick and took running back Lee White out of Weber State, who would make the roster but only see 1 game of action this year. 6 picks later, it was the Colts' turn. They selected offensive lineman John Williams from Minnesota, who will see action in a backup and special teams role. The draft didn't really see any team make a major shakeup that would really shape their future whatsoever, but the Jets in the offseason did add depth to their offensive line. They acquired superstar offensive guard Bob Talamini of the Houston Oilers. He was a huge factor in the Oilers winning the first 2 AFL championships in league history. He's coming off a streak of 6 consecutive AFL All-Star selections from 1962 to this past season of 67. He's also been a first-team All-Pro 3 times and a second-team All-Pro 4 times. He's just what Joe and the Jets backfield need up front to help them thrive just a little bit more. The Colts were a big favorite to win the NFL championship this year. Now at 35 years old and coming off an MVP season, Johnny Unitas was showing no signs of really slowing down. But in the preseason, something happened. So first during the last game of the preseason, which was against the Dallas Cowboys, Unitas tore muscles in his arm after being hit by a member of the Cowboys defense. Now later, Unitas would write in his autobiography that he felt that the injury actually started with an experimental night ball that the NFL was testing for better TV visibility during night games. He did also, however, state prior to this that his elbow hadn't been in the best shape for quite some time. Of course, this sent Colts fans over the edge and media experts into panic, and you can easily see why. But regardless, the Colts would have to put their trust in their backup. Earl Morrall was a seasoned veteran of 12 seasons in the NFL, having begun his career as a rookie backup for the 49ers in 1956. He broke out as a Pro Bowler with the Steelers, however, in 1957. However, after 2 terrible starts in the 1958 season, he was traded to the Detroit Lions, where he spent 7 seasons primarily as a backup, although he started 10 games in 1963. In 1965, he went to the Giants, where he was their starter. Had a really good season, but in 1966, he struggled with poor play and missed half the year due to injury. He's coming off a 1967 season where he appeared in only 8 games, not even starting in 1. In his career, he has thrown for over 12,808 yards, 97 touchdowns, has a 71.3 passer rating, and completed just under half his passes. Needless to say, Colts fans are not thrilled. Well, let's see how these teams fare in their respective leagues as we get ready for opening week. The Colts opened their season at home against the San Francisco 49ers on September 15, 1968. A very middle-of-the-road Niners club led by longtime QB John Brodie and star defensive back Jimmy Johnson. And Morrall's first start, it went pretty well. It looked bad early on as the interception he threw was returned for a touchdown to give the Niners a 7-0 lead. However, he composed himself, completed 16 of 31 passes for just under 200 yards, had 2 touchdowns, and a 27-10 Colts win. He managed to spread the ball out, completing passes to 9 different players, and the Colts running game was well spread out too with 161 yards on the ground. The Colts defense, however, was insane. Defensive backs Rick Volk, veteran Larry Lyles, and linebacker Mike Curtis each had an interception. The Colts' pass coverage was a huge deciding factor in this one. The Jets would begin their season on September 15th as well, but for the AFL, it was actually week 2 of their action, as the Jets began the year with a bye in the opening week of the season. But their task will be tough as they are facing the powerful Kansas City Chiefs, led by the great coach Hank Stram, as Joe Namath had to go head-to-head with the great Len Dawson. Hey, but Broadway Joe was a beast from the get-go, opening the scoring with a 57-yard pass to Maynard, and then giving the Jets a 17-3 lead at the half with a 30-yard strike to Maynard. 17-29, 302 yards, and 2 touchdowns. The Chiefs nearly made a comeback, but Dawson was stymied on this day with just 98 yards passing, and their run game was shut down by the Jets' front court very nicely in a tight 2019 win. Don Maynard, insane game that he had. 8 catches, 208 yards, and 2 touchdowns, averaging 26 yards a catch. At 33, he was still superb as ever. For the Colts, their opening week win put them on a roll. First, it was against an underdog yet determined Falcons club. The Colts came away with a 28-20 win. Morrall threw 3 picks, but also threw 3 touchdowns and just 7 incompletions. His favorite target was Jimmy Orr, who had 5 catches for 160 yards, including a 46-yard touchdown. Then it was a dominant 41-7 win in Pittsburgh over the Steelers, where the Colts defense stole the show. So all 3 Steelers interceptions they threw were returned for touchdowns. Veteran Bobby Boyd returned 1 for 25 yards, Charlie Stukes returned 1 for 60 yards, and Roy Hilton returned 1 for 13 yards, which would actually be the only pick of his career. The defense also sacked Steelers QBs 5 times, Bubba Smith leading the attack along with seasoned vet Ordell Brass and Fred Miller. These 3 put pressure and took the pivots down and also made them make bad passes. The Colts were no longer just winning, they were dominating. Next was a 28-7 win over Dick Butkus and the Bears. And Morrall was on point in this one, 14-25, 302 yards, 3 touchdown passes. Looked like Earl was really setting into this difficult role in the big cleats he had to fill Johnny Unitas. Played his best game yet this year. Jimmy Orr caught 2 passes for 2 touchdowns for 66 and 38 yards, totaling 104 on the day, while John Mackey was making the big grabs, catching 104 yards as well for 7 catches, including a 45-yard pass. Tom Maddie's running game was restricted, but Jerry Hill, primarily a blocking back and short yardage runner, had a huge game, 18 carries for 90 yards. The Colts defense was also tremendous, shutting down the Bears' passing game to just 90 yards. Then the Colts went into San Francisco and just decimated the 49ers, 42-14. Morrall played decent, whereas Mackey caught 2 TDs, and Unitas was back and saw some brief action, but it was the Colts defense and secondary that made the magic happen. 3 interceptions, 1 each for Boyd and Volk, as well as 1 for linebacker Dennis Galbitz. The Colts are 5-0 to start the season and look unstoppable. For the Jets, things looked good as they moved to 2-0 with a crazy 47-31 win over the Pats. Namath played okay, had 2 touchdowns, but also struggled a bit. But their secondary no doubt won them this one, as it was Randy Beverly's 68-yard interception return for a touchdown that opened the scoring. but Jim Hudson snagged 2 picks that were key in this one. However, they were upset by the Buffalo Bills on the road, 37-35. Namath threw 4 touchdown passes, but threw an awful 5 interceptions and 24 total incompletions. Despite this, great games from Jets star receiving core Maynard had 3 catches for 114 yards, including a 55-yard touchdown pass, while George Sauer Jr. had 7 catches for 113. Matt Snell also rushed for 124 yards on this day. Namath played better the following week in a thrilling late-game 23-20 comeback win over the Chargers, hitting them their first loss of the year. However, the Jets' defense was the ones causing the most damage, as Beverly, along with Johnny Sample and Cornell Gordon, each snagged key interceptions. But Namath is brutal the following week, throwing 5 interceptions again. Despite 341 yards passing, he's coming under heavy scrutiny for his careless pass attempts, and many feeling his style of play will never allow the Jets to be a winning team. Again, Maynard and Sauer play excellently. The latter had 9 catches for 191 yards, 21.2 yards a catch. Maynard had 7 catches for 140, 20 yards a catch. With numbers this good, a loss like this is just inexcusable, and Broadway Joe shoulders the blame. The Jets fall to 3-2 with what looks like it's going to be another close one, no cigar season on the horizon. The Colts' hot streak, however, came to a screeching halt with a 30-20 loss to the Cleveland Browns on October 20th. The Browns' running game and defense helped them stun the Colts, as Johnny Unitas came into the game in relief from Morrell and was absolutely brutal in this one, completing just 1 of 11 passes and throwing 3 interceptions. Not very like him at all. It's clear that he's not fully healed. Things weren't looking any easier going into their next game on October 27, 1968, as they faced their division rivals, the Los Angeles Rams, at home, the same team that stunned them and robbed them of a playoff berth last season. They are led by Pro Bowl quarterback Roman Gabriel and one of the all-time great defensive linemen, Merlin Olsen. This Rams team was undefeated at 6-0 to boot and leading the Coastal Division. But despite the Rams striking first on a field goal, the Colts defense gave the Rams a headache, sacking QB Gabriel 5 times and intercepting him twice in a 27-10 win, which also saw Morrell play much better than the prior week. Tom Addy scampering for 87 yards on the ground, and Hill adding 52. The Colts then began to look unstoppable. First, a 26-0 win over a really good New York Giants club, led by the great QB Fran Tarkenton. Morrell played very well, completing 16 passes on 25 attempts for just over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, while the Colts defense made the day difficult for Frank, as well as backup quarterback Gary Wood. Then it was off to Detroit to face the struggling Lions squad. Morrell threw for nearly 250 yards and 160, then went to Jimmy Orr on just 5 catches, averaging 32 yards a catch. Crazy, but once again the Colts defensive line was on fire with 4 sacks, and they win 27-10. The Colts then garnered their second shutout win in 3 games, a 27-0 triumph over a pretty solid St. Louis Cardinals club at this point. Had the 4th best offense in the league, led by star running back Jimmy Rowland and tight end Jackie Smith. The defense held Rowland to just 27 yards. The Colts secondary took the Cards apart with 5 interceptions, 2 each for Boyd and Lyles and 1 for Volk. Morrell continued to look great with 3 touchdown passes, 2 of which were to Willie Richardson, who had 126 yards on 5 catches. The touchdowns came from 29 and 79 yards. Mackey added 105 yards receiving, while backup running back Terry Cole ran for 71 yards in this game and saw the Colts move 9-1 on the year. And indeed, with 4 games to go, they sit in first place, but the Rams are still 8-1-1 and are in striking distance. And it's going to once again come down to the 2 powerhouses, as the Niners and the lowly Falcons will not be able to reach a playoff spot and are out. But now we go back to where we left off with the Jets, at a decent yet still not overly thrilling 3-2. The Jets, however, rebounded from their previous bad week, and Namath bounced back big time from his terrible outing. In a very defensive game, however, against the Houston Oilers, who had one of the better defensive cores in the league. Namath's late-game heroics, however, led to a 2014 win, with Matt Snell getting the game-winning touchdown as he and Boozer combined for 100 yards rushing. But the Jets' defense stole the show. 6 sacks. That tough core of Philbin, Biggs, and Elliott wasn't enough. If they weren't sacking Houston quarterbacks again, they were causing them to pressure to make bad throws. What a game for this very underrated core, and a much-needed win for the Jets. And then they proceeded to destroy the Patriots, 48-14 at home. And the offense was solid here. Sauer had a great game with 84 yards and 5 catches, while backup running back Billy Joe had 80 yards and 11 carries and 3 touchdowns. But it was the Jets' defense again that was crazy good. This week it was 7 sacks. Oh, poor Mike Taliaferro and Tom Sherman that were the victims. And it was also a big part of the Pats throwing. Get this. 5 interceptions. 2 for Johnny Sample, proving to be a huge grab for the Jets, and having a tremendous season. The other 3 were courtesy of Baird, Hudson, and Atkinson. The lowly Buffalo Bills who their only win this year had been against the Jets, gave them a run for their money again and were close to another upset. But again, Namath's late-game heroics led to a 25-21 win, and Sample again had 2 interceptions. One was returned for 36 yards for a touchdown. The Jets had 3 sacks. Sauer had 88 yards receiving. They are rolling in and now 6-2. Sample's interception streak reached 5 in 3 games, as he, along with Baird and Ralph Baker, had a pick each in a 26-7 home win against the Houston Oilers. The Jets' 4th win in a row. Namath only completed 7 passes into this game, but 4 were to Sauer for 128 yards, averaging 32 yards a catch. What a year he's having. Also, Snell having a great year, 70 yards on the ground. The Jets are now 7-2. The Jets, however, were about to face their biggest test yet on November 17, 1968, the defending AFL champion Oakland Raiders. The Raiders themselves were carrying a 7-2 record into this game, and they were led by 1967 AFL MVP Darryl LaMonica at quarterback, as well as the great Fred Biletnikoff at receiver, Hewitt Dixon at running back, and an offensive line led by youngsters Gene Upshaw and Art Shell. This team is just deep everywhere. They had an insanely great defense with the likes of Ike Lassiter and Ben Davidson leading the way up front, linebacking corps bolstered by Gus Otto and Dan Connors, and a tremendous secondary led by the great Willie Brown, Kent McLaughlin, Dave Grayson, and rookie George Atkinson. They also had one of the best kickers in the game, 41-year-old George Blanda, who was actually once a great quarterback. Some of the media hyped up this game as the Jets' biggest test, and this will determine if they truly are for real or not, as this game is also on the road. The game was also being carried by NBC, and the Jets' following that they have garnered on the East Coast will ensure a huge audience, and the Raiders, of course, had a big following on the West Coast. The game started out very well for the Jets after 2 field goals from Jim Turner early on, but the Raiders got a 7-6 lead after 1 quarter. The Raiders took a 14-6 lead early in the second, but Namath pulled it together and plunged one from a 1-yard out, and the 2-point convert failed, and the Jets trailed 14-12 at the half. The Jets took the lead after Mathis ran in from 4 yards out, and the Jets now had a 19-14 advantage, but the Raiders got a touchdown and a 2-point convert, and it was 22-19 at the end of 3 quarters, setting the stage for an insane 4th quarter. The Jets were at midfield early in the 4th quarter, and Namath bombs a pass to Don Maynard, who makes it 26-22 and silences the Raider Nation. Field goal puts the Jets up by a touchdown, 29-22. The Raiders would, tie it, but then Turner gets his 4th field goal of the game to make it 32-29 with close to a minute to go. And then, what the f***? Hey, where'd the game go? Yes, indeed, this is the infamous Heidi game, where the game, due to many pass incompletions and penalties, slowed the 4th quarter down quite a bit. NBC at first decided that the East Coast feed to the new TV film Heidi would air as scheduled, but then they actually began to change their minds. But here's the problem. Communication lines were flooded with concerned viewers wondering what was going to happen before the end of the game, and the movie still went on to air, as again, nobody was able to stop it. Again, 1968, no internet, no 24-hour sports news stations or phone apps, no cell phones, period. Nada. Not even a 1-800 line to check scores. And during the film, a lower thirds graphic popped up later on, reading something along the lines of, Raiders beat Jets 43-32. What the f***? Yes, the Raiders came back with a quick touchdown, and then the Jets fumbled the ensuing kickoff that was ran for another Raiders touchdown. Well, the Heidi backlash was one thing, but that's a whole other story. But then the focus became on how the Jets blew their biggest game of the year pretty epically. Namath made some great plays here, and while he only completed barely half of his passes, he made 19 connections for 381 yards. Maynard, 228 yards on 10 catches, averaging 22.8 yards a catch, including the big 50-yarder. Be that as it may, the Jets still sit at 7-3-0 on top of the East, and the Oilers are the closest one to them, and while it's possible they can catch them, it doesn't look overly probable. While the Dolphins and Patriots are mathematically in it at this point, it's highly unlikely that they'll catch them, and the Bills are just out. And now we go back to the Colts. Their next challenge was a pretty good Vikings team led by the most savage defensive line in the league, the Purple People Eaters, led by future Hall of Famers Alan Page and Carl Eller. And while they got to morale a couple times, the quarterback was tremendous, completing 17 of 24 passes for 259 yards and 2 touchdowns, while Willie Richardson caught 6 passes for 150 yards, including a 39-yard touchdown. The Colts' running game was also tremendous here. Terry Cole ran for 71 yards and Matty ran for 62, combining for 133. Cole also had a touchdown. And the Colts' defense committed 5 sacks as their defense just contributes to many of their wins. However, the Rams also won this week to boot. Then the Colts completely humiliated the lowly Atlanta Falcons, 44-0. The combo of Morrell and Richardson again do damage. Morrell threw just 6 incompletions on 23 passes and 2 touchdowns. Richardson had 5 catches for 81 yards, including a 34-yard touchdown. Cole was also great on the ground again with 68 yards. Also, Bobby Boyd is just continuing to have an amazing season, snagging 2 picks. The Colts moved to 11-1, but the Rams also won and are still in this thing. It was a very defensive game against the struggling 2-time defending NFL and Super Bowl champion Packers, but the Colts came out on top 60-9. Cole played very well again, 83 yards on 21 carries, and Matty added 55, and the Colts held Green Bay to just under 200 yards of offense. Not only does that put the Colts at 12-1, but the Rams suffered an albeit controversial loss to the Bears, but still, a loss is a loss. 17-16, and the Colts are in the playoffs. It's the first time since their 1966 playoff bowl win they'll see any postseason action, shaking off last year's heartbreak at last. But to add the final insult, the Colts closed the season with their 8th straight win, finishing 13-1 on the year, with a close 20-24 win over the Rams. The offense really actually couldn't get much going here, but again, that defensive front core recorded 5 sacks, linebacker Mike Curtis returned an interception for a touchdown. Huge way to end the regular season for the Baltimore Colts. And now, back to the boys in white and green. The New York Jets are coming off that heartbreaking loss to Oakland, but they stay on the West Coast and managed to dominate a really good San Diego Chargers club, led by star receivers Lance Alworth and Gary Garrison. And they won by a score of 37-15. Namath was really good here, 17 of 31, 337 yards and 2 touchdowns, including an 87-yard touchdown strike to Dom Maynard, who totaled 166 yards in 6 catches. George Sauer had 124. Matt Snell played one of his best games of the year, too, 18 carries for 91 yards and a touchdown. The Jets defense intercepted 4 John Handle passes as well. The Oilers had a bye week, but all the Jets need to do is win one more game to officially clinch their first ever postseason berth to the AFL Championship game. And they have done it with an emphatic 35-14 win over the Dolphins. Dom Maynard, 7 catches, 160 yards, 3 touchdowns from 54, 47, and 25 yards out. The Jets did, had a bit of a scare. They thought Namath was hurt, but it turns out they were just trying to get back up Babe Pirelli some time as well as the season was starting to come to a close. Snell and Mathis combined for 106 yards on the ground to boot. And the Jets defense sacked poor Bob Greasy 5 times in this game. The Jets are looking more and more like the well-oiled perfect machine in this one. The Jets are AFL East champions, and fans across the New York region are loving this club. To hell with what the media thinks, the Jets have gone from being zeros to heroes of being a team with a small cult following, one of the most loyal and passionate fan bases in the game. But this don't mean the Jets are going to phone it in the rest of the way. No, anything but. The Jets defense held the lowly Bengals to just 165 yards of offense in a 27-14 win. Namath and Pirelli again shared quarterbacking duties, having clinched a playoff spot. Snell played great with 79 yards on the ground. Maynard had yet another 100-yard game on a hot streak with 103 yards on 5 catches and a touchdown. Tight end Pete Lamons was killing the Bengals in the short game with 96 yards on 8 catches, playing his best game of the year. The Jets ended the season with a 31-7 win in Miami. Namath and Pirelli again played together, but what a game for Bake Turner. 7 catches, 157 yards, 22.4 yards a catch. Big game from Emerson Boozer, 83 yards on 17 carries. The Jets sacked QBs Ken Hammond and Rick Norton a combined 5 times. The Jets finished the year with their best record ever, 11-3-0, and another 4-game win streak to end it. So now, let's look at the final numbers. The Colts had the second best ranked offense in the league, only behind the Dallas Cowboys when it came to most points produced. They had the third best pass game and a decent 8th in rushing out of 16 teams. Their defense, however, was ranked as the best by giving up the least points, just giving up 144, that's 10.3 points a game. Giving up the 4th least passing yards and 3rd least rushing yards to boot. The Jets out of 10 teams, like the Colts, had the second best offense behind the Raiders, 3rd in passing yards and a pretty lowly 8th in rushing despite their talent. Their defense was ranked pretty good, 4th, and despite the points they'd give up, their yardage was minimal, 2nd against the pass. With a secondary like that, not surprised, and 1st against the run, but sadly a lot of Namath's turnovers resulted in points. Now, the AFL's Joe Namath wasn't the most accurate passer, dare I say even the best, but he was one of the most exciting quarterbacks in the game, could make big plays in the long ball, which is what he was paid to do. That's what his reputation was built on, and he knew how to win. His 3,147 yards was 3rd best in the league. His 15 touchdowns were 5th, but his 17 interceptions are pretty bad compared to the ratio of touchdowns. He threw the 2nd most in the AFL. He did have 187 completions for 3rd, and his 49.2 completion percentage, while not looking very good by today's standards, was still actually 4th best. And his 72.1 passer rating was ranked 4th. Earl Morrall shocked many with how he delivered as quarterback this year. 2,909 yards was second best in the league, and his 26 touchdowns led the league. His 17 interceptions weren't overly bad compared to the touchdown-interception ratio, as he did learn to, well, cope with that as the year went on. His 182 completions were tied for third. 57.4 completion percentage was also third, and his 93.2 passer rating was second only behind Packers icon, the legendary Bart Starr. Both teams were known for their pass attack, with Morrall being more strategic and methodical, and Namath went balls to the wall for the big play. Their running game, however, should not be overlooked. Matt Snell of the Jets had a good year, 747 yards rushing, which was 6th best in the AFL, while Tom Matty of the Colts was 10th best in the NFL with 662 yards. Snell's 4.2 yards a carry was also 6th best, while Matty's 3.6 was seen as somewhat underwhelming, but still made some big first down plays. Emerson Boozer added 441 yards on the ground for the Jets, while the Colts' Terry Cole played some excellent games, adding 418. Jerry Hill added 360. The Jets' receiving corps was insanely good, allowing Namath to make those big plays. Don Maynard was still efficient as ever. His 1,297 yards was just 15 shy of first-place Lance Allworth of the Chargers. His 57 catches were 5th, and his 10 touchdown catches were tied for 3rd. George Sauer Jr. was insanely good as well. His 1,141 yards was 3rd best behind his teammate. His 66 catches were 2nd, also just shy of Allworth with 68, and he had 3 touchdowns. The Colts had 3 receivers over 600 yards. Jimmy Orr led the way with 743, Willie Richardson had 698, while John Mackey had 644, and led the team in receptions. On paper, the Jets, well, they had big playmakers, but the Colts seem to have more depth. And the Jets gave up the least amount of sacks in the AFL with just 18, with Winston Hill at tackle leading the way. It was a huge reason for giving Namath some breathing room. Guard Dave Herman also had a good year and gave Namath the exact time he needed to make those plays. The Colts gave up the 7th least amount of sacks. Bob Vogel did have a great year, however. All in all, it was mostly young offensive line, but they seem to do pretty well more often than not. The Jets seem to have more aggression, however, up front. New York Jets defense was superb up front. Their 43 sacks was 3rd best in the AFL, thanks to tremendous seasons by the AFL sack leader Jerry Philbin with 14. Roland Biggs had 10.5, and John Elliott had 10. They reached the top 10 in that category too. And they were number 1 against the run in the league, as mentioned, as Al Atkinson had a career year and was huge in that regard at linebacker. And the Colts front court had the 3rd most sacks in the NFL with 45. Bubba Smith had an excellent sophomore season, 8th in sacks with 10.5, while Ordell Brazy and Billy Ray Smith each had 7. Also, they gave up the 3rd least rushing yards, and Mike Curtis was also great at rushing quarterbacks and was a big part of that too, with his first All-Pro season. Johnny Sample's hot streak up back-to-back 2 interceptions games, as well as having 5 over the course of 3 straight games in that stretch, helped his total of 7 on the year, which tied him for 3rd in the AFL, while Jim Hudson's 5 was tied for 7th. Randy Beverly and Bill Baird each had 4, while the Jets had a total of 28 picks. It was the 2nd best in the AFL, and gave up the 2nd least passing yards in the league, an amazing secondary. The Colts also have an incredible secondary as well. Veteran Bobby Boyd's incredible season of 8 picks tied him for 3rd in the NFL. Rick Volk had 6, tying him for 10th, while seasoned veteran Larry Lyles snagged 5. The Colts' 29 interceptions were 2nd best in the NFL, and they gave up the 4th least passing yards. Hey, even the Jets' kicking core was superb. Jim Turner led the AFL in points with 145. His 73.9 field goal percentage was 2nd best. And Curly Johnson was among the AFL's best punters. His 43.9 yards a punt was 2nd best in the league. As for the Colts, Lou Michaels had a 64.3 yard field goal percentage, which would not be the best by today's standards, but 5th in the NFL in 1968. His 102 points was 3rd. David Lee was not the best punter in the league, but he was certainly far from the worst. He had 39.5 yards a punt. The Jets had a total of 11 All-Stars out part of the 1968 AFL All-Star Game, the equivalent to the NFL's Pro Bowl. Quarterback Joe Namath, as well as his star receivers Maynard and Sauer, and Emerson Boozer, was chosen. 2 offensive linemen, Dave Herman and Winston Hill, were also part of the big game, and an incredible defensive line, Philbin, Elliott, and Biggs, were all selected. Al Atkinson was chosen at linebacker, but none of the secondary, oddly enough. And kicker Jim Turner caps it off. The Colts had 8 Pro Bowl selections, and Earl Morrall getting his first since 1957. Tom Addy finally getting his first. Tight end John Mackey gets his 5th and final Pro Bowl selection. Fellow receiver Willie Richardson gets recognized. All Bob Vogel represents the offensive line, and each section of the Colts defense is represented. Fred Miller for the defensive line, linebacker Mike Curtis, and defensive back Bobby Boyd gets his 5th and final selection to boot. Joe Namath is named NFL MVP for the first time. Now it's clear that finally having a franchise quarterback and building around him has worked. and Namath proved to be a great leader and playmaker. His ability to turn this team into a winner and instill confidence in his teammates helped make them triumph this season. And hey, what about this? Earl Morrall was named MVP of the NFL. Now this one very few expected. Colts fans and the media didn't really believe too much in him, and indeed his value was proven as he had to fill the shoes of one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game. And he still steered the Colts offense into the right direction and was highly successful in doing so. And much credit to Coach Weeb Ewbank, who was named AFL Coach of the Year by the Pro Football Writers of America. Excellent accomplishment for Ewbank. But on the other side of the coin, young Don Shula, who took over for Ewbank and the Colts, whipped his team into shape. He took a different approach and was named NFL's Coach of the Year for guiding a team without his star QB back to prominence after a heartbreaking end to last season. This is actually Shula's third time winning the award. He did it last year, as well as 64. But the regular season is done, and now it's playoff time. So the Colts will host the Western Conference Championship against the Central Champion Minnesota Vikings. They were led by head coach Bud Grant, who came over the year prior from the CFL's Winnipeg Blue Bombers, bringing 4 Grey Cup rings with him. And now, just in his second year, has done some great things with his Viking teams. He put his faith in legendary CFL quarterback Joe Kapp from the BC Lions to be his main guy. And of course, the Purple People Eaters defensive core, Carl Eller and Alan Page leading the way, along with Jim Marshall and Gary Larson. With their 8-6-0 record, they were heavy underdogs. In the first quarter, the Purple People Eaters were putting a lot of pressure on Morrall, but the Vikings offense couldn't capitalize. But Morrall was finally able to get the Colts on the board with a 3-yard TD toss to Tom Mitchell at 7-0 at the half. It wasn't the strongest first half, but the Colts took control in the second. Morrall connected with John Mackey on a 49-yard touchdown play in the third quarter to make it 14-0. Then it was time for the defense to shine. Mike Curtis took a fumble ball and returned it 60 yards for a touchdown, 21-0. The Vikings are basically just playing catch-up here with the Colts, and they win 24-14. They were favored by 11, so they're just barely under the spread. And for the first time since 1964, the Baltimore Colts are going to the NFL Championship. And Morrall played a smart game, 13-22 for 280 yards and 2 touchdowns. While Willie Richardson had 6 catches for 148 yards, averaging 24.7 yards a catch, and a huge game from John Mackey. 3 catches, 92 yards, including that 49-yard TD. But before we go to the NFL Championship, we head back to the AFL. And indeed, the New York Jets are about to embark on their first trip to the big game. And their task is quite daunting. They're taking on the defending champion Oakland Raiders. This game will be in New York, but the Raiders take it a 12-2-0 record, and the fact that they are indeed the defending champions. And this, as well as the Heidi game, the result, not the movie, is still fresh in people's minds. The Jets are actually favored by 2, but there's a lot of skepticism if they can't get it done. The Jets start quickly, however, with their first possession starting in good field position, and a few plays later, Namath found Don Maynard for a 14-yard touchdown. The Jets' defense was frustrating and causing LaMonica to make many mistakes, and they led 10-0 after Turner's field goal after 1 quarter. But the Raiders pulled it together, and the 80-yard drive ended in a touchdown, cutting the Jets' lead to 10-7. The teams exchanged field goals, and the Jets would still lead at halftime 13-10. But the Raiders had momentum going into the second half in the third quarter, and the game was tied 13-all. But Namath, despite many incompletions, was playing a more strategic game than we were used to seeing on this next drive. He killed the clock with a 14-play, 80-yard drive that resulted in a 20-yard touchdown strike to Pete Lamons, and the Jets are 15 minutes away from glory, leading 20-13 after 3 quarters. The Raiders, however, were not going to give up that easy. Another field goal from Blanda cut the Jets' gap to 20-16. But Namath then threw a costly pass intercepted by defensive back George Atkinson, who returned it 32 yards to the Jets' 5-yard line. The Raiders led 23-20, which is over 8 minutes ago, but the Jets fans rallied behind their team. And indeed, they felt it was time for Namath to make that big play. And indeed, he did. A 52-yard pass to Maynard with the Jets at the 6, as the 62,000 plus at Shea Stadium erupted in joy. A 6-yard touchdown the next play later to Maynard made it 27-23 with 7:47 left to play. The Raiders still had time. But the Raiders made a mistake, gambling on their next drive on a 4th down while in field goal range. And Verlin Biggs sacked LaMonica. The Raiders squandered their next drive with a fumble. And the Raiders' final drive was stopped at midfield. The New York Jets are AFL champions for the very first time. The celebration among the fans at Shea Stadium and all across New York is epic. The team was finally able to prove the naysayers wrong. Well, at least for now. Namath didn't play his best game. He threw 30 incompletions, but he made the big plays at the right time once again, threw 3 touchdown passes, and still had 266 yards. Don Maynard played another beauty. 6 catches, 118 yards for 2 touchdowns, as well as that big 52-yard catch that set up his second TD catch coming up in the clutch. Sauer added 70 yards in catches. Matt Snell was also a strong force on running plays, 71 yards on 19 carries, and Boozer added 51. Whew, what a journey. You know what, and I've seen or heard online, Jets fans who were around at this time, they were simply happy winning the AFL Championship. But now they're off to the AFL versus NFL World Championship game. So now the Colts gun for the NFL Championship against the Cleveland Browns on the road, the same team that upset them in 1964 for that title. And while the Colts are favored by 6, keep in mind the Browns are the only team that beat them this season. So that sits in the head of many experts. The Browns, however, did finish the season 10-4-0, winning the Century Division, edging out the Cardinals. And they beat the Dallas Cowboys 31-20 to win the East. They had the third-ranked offense in the league, led by reliable quarterback Bill Nielsen, as well as star running back Leroy Kelly, who had to succeed Jim Brown as their top rusher and did a pretty damn good job doing so, led the entire league with 1,239 yards. At receiver, they had the great Paul Warfield, a tremendous offensive line led by Gene Hickerson and Dig Shafrath. I think I'm pronouncing that right. If not, I'm sorry. The defensive line was led by Walter Johnson. At linebacker, they had Jim Houston. And a strong secondary led by Eric Burns and Ernie Kellerman. But the Colts were heavily focused and unshakable. The Colts defense was crazy good on this day. The Browns could barely muster up 200 yards on offense and couldn't find the end zone. The Colts' big defensive line was all over Nielsen. It was no contest. The Colts win the NFL Championship 34-0. Their first championship since 1959 and third in team history. And one of the few remaining members of that team, Ordell Bracy, was unstoppable, recording 3 unofficial sacks. The Colts' offense was good. Morale played decent enough, but it was the ground game that stole the show offensively in this one. Tom Maddy ran for three touchdowns from 1, 2, and 12 yards out, and totaled 88 on the day with 17 carries. Jerry Hill chipped in with 60 yards on 11 carries. Oh, hey, the Baltimore Colts are again on top of the NFL mountain. Many thought it was a no-brainer once they realized Moreau was a suitable replacement for Unitas. And now, the two have made it to the third annual AFL vs. NFL World Championship game, or as it would be marketed, Super Bowl III. So it comes down to this, Super Bowl III. Odds makers had the Colts favored in ranges from 18 to 19.5 points. Basically might as well have been 20. But on paper, with the benefit of hindsight, should it have been seen that way to begin with? I mean, you can make a case either way. The Colts were disciplined, had a dead uncanny focus. They were a machine pretty much, full of clean-cut All-American boys, all business led by a coach who never let them get too comfortable. The Jets, however, were still a no-quit bunch, but had a more relaxed approach, but they all worked together to win. They were a little more brash, they loved to have fun, they enjoyed the New York life. And again, much like I mentioned about Namath, they looked more like and acted like rock stars. And Namath himself, after the AFL title win, boldly stated that there were 5 AFL quarterbacks better than Earl Morrall. Himself, his backup, Babe Parilli, LaMonica of the Raiders, Heddle of the Chargers, and Miami's Bob Greasy. And further added that the Colts would be better with Parilli as a quarterback. I mean, the Colts were 13-1. Many laughed off Namath's comments as ridiculous at the time. I'd probably see it that way too. The differences between Namath and Morrall were something as it is. Again, Morrall was more strict-minded. He was more focused and strategic. Namath looked for the big play to swing the game his way, but was also criticized for his careless pass attempts. And many felt the Colts secondary would eat him up. The odds makers felt the Jets only really had 2 receivers and aren't good on short patterns, while the Colts have many threats on the long and short patterns, and the Jets secondary isn't up to that task. Both teams bolster great defensive lines, but the Jets had the better offensive line here. That didn't seem to be factored in too much. The Jets were angry that they were such large underdogs, but also factoring in that the NFL dominated the first 2 bowl games is another reason. The AFL by many by and large, but fans, media, were still considered a distant second. It definitely seemed like only the Jets and their fans had any faith. Even a good chunk of the New York sports media didn't really believe in the Jets. The first game in January 1967 between the AFL and NFL for the Big Championship did quite well, simulcast on NBC and CBS, and pulled in a grand total of an estimated 51.18 million viewers. However, the following year, strictly on CBS, it only pulled in 39.12 million, a loss of over 12 million viewers. Both games did generate excellent revenue at the stadium box office, but there was concern about viewership in the third game that would be broadcast strictly on NBC. There wasn't high hopes for big TV ratings like the first game, but the Orange Bowl in Miami was sold out with over 75,000 fans ready for this game. But due to ad costs and revenues, there was a rumor at the time, and again, I should emphasize this has not been confirmed, that the relationship between the AFL and the NFL was in danger, and that due to only a $1,000 increase between last year's game and this year's in terms of ad revenue for 30-second commercials, were far down from the $12,000 increase between the first and second games. There was also rumors that the game was in danger of just being scrapped altogether in the future. Again, these are unsubstantiated claims, but wouldn't be shocking if so. But 3 days before the game, Joe Namath grabbed more headlines. He was making an appearance at the Miami Touchdown Club, and he had a few drinks in him, according to many reports, and was getting riled up by chirping Colts fans. He proclaimed to the whole audience, quote, "We're gonna win the game. I guarantee it." But the legend of the story, like many things in the lore of professional sports, has grown beyond its roots. Namath's guarantee was reactionary, and it wasn't meant to be much of a public statement. Others have argued this simply because of what he said after the AFL championship. Eubank later said he could have shot Namath for that comment, but that made the story so infamous was because Luther Evans of the Miami Herald was bringing sensationalism to it. Simply the Colts just laughed it off and thought it was a big joke. So did other members of the media, while a few called Namath for his quote, outright arrogant. But now, the time for talking is over. January 12th, 1969, 75,389 in attendance in the Orange Bowl in Miami to see the NFL champion and heavily favored Baltimore Colts take on the big underdog, the AFL champion New York Jets. Namath's guarantee has seemingly increased interest in the game, but the Colts are still seen as unbeatable. The pregame featured a marching band playing Mr. Touchdown USA as people dressed as footballs paraded out representing all AFL and NFL teams, minus the Jets and the Colts, with them being saved for last on top of an oversized layered cake. I can't make this up. The astronauts of Apollo 8 led the Pledge of Allegiance, while trumpeter Lloyd Gleiser of the Washington National Symphony Orchestra played the national anthem. So now came the coin toss. The Jets won it and elected to receive the ball. So indeed, Lou Michaels of the Colts lines up the kick, and we are off and running. 62-yard kick, which Will Christie takes past the goal line and manages to get a good 25-yard return. The Jets will start at their 23. Namath goes to the running game. Snell carries the ball 3 yards and then follows it up with a 9-yard scamper for a fresh set of downs. But then the Colts blitz patterns, which have been working all season, helped tackle Emerson Boozer for a 4-yard loss. Namath completes his first pass attempt, however, a 9-yard gain to Matt Snell. But on 3rd and 5, a handoff to Snell results in a 2-yard loss, bringing up 4th and 7. Despite an offside by the Colts on the punt attempt, it's still only 4th and 2, and Eubank keeps the special teams unit out there. And Johnson punts it 39 yards, and the Colts start at their 27. The first play from scrimmage for them sees Morrell hit John Mackey for 19 yards. Then the next play, Matty runs the ball and gets 10 for another first down. Hill then carries it 7 yards into Jets territory, but Matty only gets 1 yard on the ensuing play, bringing up 3rd and 2. Hill bulldozes past the Jets' front core and for 5 yards gets a fresh set of downs. He, however, would lose 3 on the next play, and after an incompletion brought up 3rd and 13, Morrell made a nice 15-yard pass to Mitchell to get a first down, and they are on the Jets' 19. However, after 2 incompletions and Morrell getting stuck, forcing himself to run for no gain, Michaels went for a 27-yard field goal, and it was no good! The game is still scoreless. Namath and the offense took over at their own 20 after an incompletion to Snell and a short 2-yard pass to Lamons brought up 3rd and 8. Namath found Mathis for a 13-yard gain, getting them a first down. But Namath threw 3 straight incompletions and the Jets were forced to punt. This time Johnson booted at 38 yards. The Colts, however, got it to good field position down at their own 41. But after 2 incompletions with a small 3-yard run by Hill in between, it was 3 and out, and the Colts punted for the first time. David Lee boots a beautiful 51-yard punt, burying the Jets back at their own 4. Namath, who is seemingly all business so far in this game, was definitely taking things seriously despite his, recent antics, shall we say. He refocuses and hands the ball off to Snell twice, who makes gains of 4 and 5 yards right now 3rd and 1. And Namath makes a nice little Blake linear pass to Sauer, who gets the first down, but fumbles! Ron Porter recovers for the Colts, and you can hear the media and everyone laughing already as the Colts take over at the 12. And a run for a 1-yard loss by Hill is the last play of the first quarter, and we have a scoreless game so far. The Jets have yet to reach the Colts territory, but it's noticed that Namath is sticking to a smarter game here, and the Jets secondary is playing pretty good. The Colts did squander one chance, but they begin the second quarter with momentum on their side, second 11 on the Jets 13. It was almost certain that the Colts were going to open the scoring and get on the board first, and indeed on the first play of the second quarter, Matty gets them down to the 6-yard line. That brings up 3rd and 4. Morrell then takes a snap. The pass is tipped by Atkinson, goes off Tom Mitchell into the hands of Randy Beverly, who intercepts it in the end zone, leaving the Colts and many others completely dumbfounded. And now Namath gets another chance from his 20. The Jets coaches as well as Namath notice Snell seem to be fooling the Colts defense a bit with the way he runs. Again, just doing the complete opposite of everything they do. So Namath was going to try this approach. Snell got handed the ball 4 straight times for gains of 1, 7, 6, and 12 yards. And it seemed, again, he just would go the opposite way, and somehow it just seemed to work with his speed and power. But Namath was also reading the Colts' blitz patterns and went to the air. But after an incompletion to Sauer, he hit Mathis for 6 yards. And on 3rd and 4, now in Colts territory for the first time, is Sauer with a beautiful pass for 14 yards to get them to the Baltimore 34. The Namath and Sauer connection continued for 11 yards to get them to the Colts 23. But it seems the Colts had no answer for Snell or Namath's quick release on this drive. Boozer picked up 2 yards, and Namath this time passes to Snell, who pushes his way to the Colts' 9-yard line. 1st and goal. Snell takes another 5 yards. And then from the 4-yard line, Matt Snell gets into the end zone for the touchdown. The extra point is good. The Jets strike first. A shocking turn of events as Namath was reading the Colts defense like a pop-up book. And indeed, it's 7-0 for the Jets. What a smart drive conducted by Namath, as Snell was great and so was Sauer. Again, the Jets on the ensuing kickoff, however, booted at 58 yards as Preston Pearson returned to the 28. Morrell, however, looks like he's trying to stay focused. After an incompletion, seeing that the Jets have the Colts star receivers well covered, he gets a pass to Tom Matty, who bolts for the 30-yard gain on that play, all the way to the Jets' 42. Hill gains 4 yards to get the Colts to the 38, but Matty is stopped for no gain, and an incompletion to Mackey brings out Michaels for a field goal attempt, and it's no good. The Colts are really messing up their chances so far in this game. Well, Namath again takes over on his own 20, and after a short gain from Boozer, Namath is ready for the bomb. Airs it out to Sauer for a 35-yard gain, again fooling the Colts defense, and on the 44 of Baltimore. Then Matt Snell continues to bother the Colts defense with a 9-yard gain, followed by a 3-yard run for a fresh set of downs on the Baltimore 32. But after 2 straight incompletions and then getting sacked by Dennis Gobbets, Turner comes out for his first field goal attempt of the game, a 41-yarder. That's no good. Jeez. Rough day for the kicker so far. It's still 7-0 Jets. The Colts start, however, from their own 20. And Morrell hits Richardson for a short pass for 6 yards. He then hands it up to Matty, just trying to get the first down, but the Colts blocking opens a wall. Matty reads and keeps going. He's still going. Could he? Will he go? Although, almost. Baird finally chases him down and catches him at the Jets 16. What a play for Matty. Wow. And again, after that, Hill gains a yard. And Morrell goes for Willie Richardson near the goal line, but he's intercepted by Johnny Sample. The Jets' secondary is really taking Morrell and his receiving core apart. Namath went to Snell 3 straight times after this. He gained 5 yards combined on the first 2 carries, but was stopped for no gain on the third. Namath didn't utilize the clock enough on this drive, and the Jets had to punt near their own goal line. However, Johnson's did boot away a decent 39-yarder, and the Colts got it to the Jets' 42 and had 43 seconds to get on the board. After a 1-yard completion to Hill, the Colts went for a flea flicker play as Matty took the handoff and pitched it back to Morrell, who failed to see a wide-open Jimmy Orr in the end zone, and said that Jerry Hill was intercepted by Jim Hudson. Oh my goodness, Morrell's having a terrible night. That was the last play of the half, and to the shock of almost everyone watching, the Jets led 7-0 at halftime. The Colts were the most disciplined team in the game, are playing a very undisciplined game, screwing up many chances, but here's the thing that really stands out. Not only is Namath playing a very smart game at quarterback, the Jets' secondary is unbelievable. They're executing tight coverage on Richardson, Mackey, and Orr, and reading these plays in a big way. Speaking of reading plays, Namath and Snell just seem to know what the Colts defense is going to do before even the Colts do. Anyway, the game is still too close to call. Can the Colts pull it together, or can the Jets keep them at bay? Well, the third quarter is underway, and the Jets kick off to the Colts, and it's time for Baltimore to step up. Tom Matty gets the handoff and fumbles. Ralph Baker gets a big turnover for the Jets. They take over on the Colts 33. Namath goes back to the running game as Boozer gains 8 yards and Snell gains 4. And another carry by Boozer and a short 5-yard pass to Snell brings up 3rd and 3. And Snell drives hard to get the first down at the Colts 11. But then Baltimore's defense wakes up a bit. They tackle Boozer for a big 5-yard loss and sack Namath for a 9-yard loss. Then Joe throws an incompletion. Out comes Turner for a 32-yard field goal attempt, and it's good! The Jets now lead 10-0. As the Colts' continuous turnovers are just killing them, the Jets are in complete control of this game. And it shows again, the Colts start their next drive on their own 26. An incompletion, a catch by Hill for no gain, and Morrell is brought down. It's 3 and out. The Colts punt, and Earl Morrell's day is done. The Jets start their next drive at their own 32. After a short pass to Mathis that gained a yard, Namath found Sauer for a 14-yard catch to bring them close to midfield. After an incompletion and Boozer's 4-yard run, the Jets were in Colts territory on 3rd and 6. And Namath found Pete Lamons for an 11-yard catch to the Colts 38. And then he finds Snell for a throw, a 14-yard gain, now down to the 24. But then they were held to 4th down. Turner came out for a 30-yard field goal attempt, and it's good! 13-0 Jets. Is this truly happening? Those watching just couldn't believe their eyes. The Colts are just being owned here. But now they have to go to the man that has brought them many success in the past, and that's Johnny Unitas, who comes into the game. Matty gains 5 on a run, but can't gain yards on a catch. And Unitas throws an incompletion as the Jets secondary just continues to cover them oh so well. So another 3 and out. The Jets get the ball back on their 37. After Snell gains 3 yards, an incompletion, and it brings up 3rd and 7 at their own 40. He finds Sauer at 11 yards to get the first down, and Namath hits Sauer for 39 yards down to the Baltimore 10. After a 4-yard gain from Snell, that's the end of the third quarter. It's 13-0 Jets after 3 quarters, and they're driving as this unexpected turn of events continues, and the Jets are 15 minutes away from pulling off what is seen as the ultimate upset in professional sports. The Colts, however, did manage to stop the Jets from a touchdown, stymieing them at the 2. But again, that sets up Turner's 3rd field goal of the game, a chip shot from 9 yards out to make it 16-0. What's more surprising here? The fact that the Jets are winning at all? The fact that they're up by 16? Or the fact that the Colts have not even scored a point? Well, either way, the Colts start from their own 27. Unitas completes a 5-yard pass to Mackey and gains 7 yards on the ground for a first down. And then after a 5-yard completion to Richardson, Matty makes another great play, fighting an opening for 19 yards all the way down to the Jets' 37. The Colts aren't finished yet. This time it's Hill's turn to make the run, and he gains 12 yards. They're down to the Jets' 25. After an incompletion to Richardson on 2nd and 10, a pass for Orr is intercepted by Beverly. His second of the game, the Jets defense have intercepted the Colts 4 times. As the Jets offense takes over at their 20, it's time to run down the clock with this big lead. Boozer and Snell each carry for 2 yards, bringing up 3rd and 6. Boozer then gets 7 for a first down. Snell gets another fresh set of downs for a 10-yard run, then adds another 7 while Boozer gets 2, bringing up 3rd and 1. Mathis is stopped for the first down, and now Turner will come in for a 42-yard field goal attempt, but it's no good. Be that as it may, the Jets killed nearly 4 minutes here, and there's only 7:08 remaining as the Colts take over at their 20. Unitas, however, throws 3 straight incompletions as the Jets' defense is just too much to handle. Well, with time running down, they had to gamble at 4th and 10, still in their own territory. This will mean the game right here if Unitas does not make a play. He takes the snap, throws it to Orr. He's got 17 yards for the first down. After 2 incompletions, however, it's 3rd and 10, but Unitas finds Mackey for 11 yards. A Jets penalty after the play results the Colts now being at the Jets' 37. After a short run for Matty, Unitas finds Richardson for his first big play of the game. A 21-yard catch down to the Jets' 15. Then after 2 incompletions, it's Orr down to the 4. And penalties push the Colts down to the 1. The Jets stop them twice, and it's 3rd and goal. But Jerry Hill finally gets the Colts in this thing with a big 1-yard plunge. The extra point is good. The Colts have life. With 3:32 remaining, they cut the Jets' lead down to 9 points at 16-7. But it still looks to be too little too late. But wait! The Colts successfully make the recovery on an onside kick and begin a whole new drive at the Jets' 44. This has suddenly become a ball game. Johnny U finds Richardson for a 6-yard gain, then hits Orr for 14 yards. 1st and 10 at the Jets 24. Still over 2 minutes left. A pass complete to Richardson for 5 yards. 2 completions ever bring up 4th and 5 at the Jets 19. This is it now. This could finally mean the game. Unitas takes the snap. Pass over to Orr. Incomplete! The Colts turn the ball over on downs. Now all the Jets have to do is run out the clock. And the Jets managed to kill over 2 minutes. The Colts get the ball back for 2 plays, but the clock winds down, and it's over. The New York Jets have done the unthinkable, becoming the first AFL team to win the Super Bowl, being nearly 20-point underdogs on top of that. 16-7 the final. Namath said it, and they did it. The football faithful across North America are stunned. Colts fans are in utter disbelief. Jets fans are jubilant and joyous across the Big Apple. What a historic moment in the world of professional sports. Indeed, this infamous shot of Joe Namath raising his index finger in the air, declaring the Jets, as they are, number 1. It's still a moment etched in time in the annals of North American sports. This truly was a big moment for the game of professional football. And it gave the AFL much needed credibility, and with this infamous guarantee and the upset that ensued, it gave the now named Super Bowl, as in the game itself, an element of a spectacle which it would become. Super Bowl III drew an estimated 41.66 million viewers, an increase of just over 2.5 million over last year. It actually exceeded expectations in many ways, as another decrease was being anticipated. And while there may not be much research to back it up, and many do, however, believe this, that Namath's guarantee making the media rounds may have helped a bit of the viewership increase. Namath still made those big plays in this game, but proved just how strategic and smart he can really be, and of course purely focused. His superstar persona was put aside, and he kept his focus on winning. He was 17 of 28 for 206 yards, making sure to read the Colts defense every which way. He reads blitz, he goes to the quick release pass. Read the Colts defense lined up a certain way and make sure Snell goes the other. Namath shut a lot of people up with his approach to this game, and the Jets' offensive line also deserves a lot of credit for helping make that happen. Namath left the Colts' talented pass rush and secondary completely powerless. The 2 NFL MVPs the last 2 seasons just couldn't get the job done. Morrell was a disaster, 6-17 for 71 yards and 3 interceptions. Some say he outright choked, others say the Jets just simply exposed him. Unitas did better. He was 11 of 24 for 110 yards, but also made some costly mistakes. Regardless, despite the Colts' constant squandering of chances, the Jets' defense really were the ones that put these 2 down. The backfield was a highlight for both clubs, however. Snell had 121 yards on 30 carries, and the way he was used in this game was a major edge in the Jets' victory, also having 40 yards in catches. He made first downs, killed the clock, and got the only touchdown of the game for the Jets. Tom Matty of the Colts, on the other hand, had an incredible game, including that big 58-yard run. He had 160 yards and 11 carries and added 30 yards receiving. The problem was the Colts weren't capitalizing on what he was delivering, but he was no doubt their MVP of this game. What a huge game for George Sauer Jr. 8 catches for 133 yards, again making those big plays. Maynard was actually shut down in this game. He didn't have a single catch. The Colts' deep receiving core fell victim to the Jets' secondary, however. Richardson only had 6 catches for 58 yards and leading all the Colts, though his biggest catch did help set up the Colts' only touchdown. Orrin Mackey had trouble the whole game as these 3 receivers combined for just 135 yards. Now to the defense. While the Colts were able to sack Namath twice, and the Jets applied great pressure to Morrell and Unitas, the run game was great on both sides, and the linebackers had trouble stopping it, but it was the Jets' secondary that was a true highlight of this game. What an incredible day for Randy Beverly. 2 interceptions. His first set up the drive for the Jets' touchdown. His second came at a key moment where it looked like Unitas was going to engineer the Colts' comeback. Also, Sample and Hudson each had one, and Baird played a great game too. They were able to frustrate and get the best of the Colts receivers and quarterbacks. Jim Turner was 3 for 5 in field goals and overall really good, and adding a convert totaling 10 points. Lou Michaels, however, had a rough day, missing 2 field goals and just a single point on the convert. So now the question remains, who is Super Bowl MVP? P. And indeed, it is Broadway Joe himself, Joe Namath, who gets the honor. Now, some feel Matt Snell should have, gotten it, and even Sauer. Another great choice would have been Randy Beverly with his 2 big interceptions, and I actually can see the argument for him especially. But Namath did play a brilliant game here in terms of how he commanded things and led the way for the Jets. And yeah, I could see how this might give out the old, let's just give it to the quarterback cliche, which the Super Bowl is sadly known for. But there's no doubt Namath's importance and value to this game and this victory made all the difference. The Colts have 3 members of this team in the Hall of Fame. Of course, Johnny Unitas, that's a no-brainer. He got his starting job back the next season after this, but was never really the same. He finished his career with a forgettable stint with the San Diego Chargers in 1973 and did get a Super Bowl ring in Super Bowl V. But he was inducted into the Hall in 1979, his first year of eligibility. Tight end John Mackey had to wait a while, but was finally given his rightful place in the Hall in 1992. He, along with Unitas a few years ago, made the NFL's 100th anniversary team, and he too eventually got a Super Bowl ring with Super Bowl V. Meanwhile, Coach Don Shula was enshrined in 1997, and while his time in Baltimore is of course very much remembered, he became best known for coaching 26 seasons for the Miami Dolphins from 1970 to 1995, which included back-to-back Super Bowl wins in the 1972 and 73 seasons, the former of which was the infamous undefeated perfect season. Some feel other Colts players such as offensive lineman Bob Vogel and defensive back Bobby Boyd deserve another look. There are 4 members of this Jets team in the Hall of Fame. The first was Joe Namath, who some feel shouldn't be in, as they felt his overall numbers weren't nearly as good as many great quarterbacks of this era. But he did accomplish a great deal of personal accolades and overcame a lot of injuries to have the career he had. Don Maynard's enshrinement in 1987, however, wasn't really argued by anybody. After all, he had nearly 12,000 yards receiving in his career. Winston Hill, who was one of the best offensive linemen of his time and sadly very grossly underrated, was posthumously inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2020. He passed away at the age of 74 in 2016. And to the surprise of nobody, Weeb Ewbank, the coach of the Jets for this big win, and the man who built the Colts into a champion in the late 1950s, was inducted in 1978. Some feel Johnny Sample, defensive back, deserves another look at Hall of Fame induction. Super Bowl III at the end of the day was clearly a game changer. It was a game changer for the world of football as the AFL was now a threat, and so much so the Chiefs won the Super Bowl the very next year. After that, the full merger was complete as all 10 AFL teams joined the NFL as one, making it a 26-team league. Many feel Super Bowl III and its impact on the game was the big reason the merger eventually happened. But that does it for our look at the indeed ever impactful road to Super Bowl III. Until next time, like and share the video, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see ya!